Hello and welcome to Blender Age Builders Part 3, Design Principles, Moving the Microphone. I always seem to be having a trouble getting this microphone where I want it. I think I'm happy with that. Okay. So in this video we're going to talk about different modeling types and universe types, and we're going to rough out the floor for our age. Opening up Blender 32 here. Okay, so if you've watched the previous two videos, this is what you have. If you haven't watched the previous two videos, watch them so that this is what you have. There are two different basic styles, I guess you could say, of modeling. The first one, the one that I'm familiar with, and the one that I used when I was using 3ds Max, is called spline modeling. Now, Blender is not typically considered to be a spline modeling program, but it does allow you to do that kind of modeling. Spline modeling takes a 2D shape and you extrude it into a 3D object, essentially. Basically, you draw it out, you have a 2D design you draw out, and you extrude that into your 3D object. The other kind of modeling is box modeling. And box modeling is like working with clay. Imagine that this box here that you start out with is a big hunk of clay. And you're a little boy or girl. I had to adjust the mic again. I'm still not getting it where I want. You know, you're a little boy or girl and you're taking this piece of clay and you're squeezing it and you're moving it around, you're stretching it, and you're going to turn into a cat. And then therefore box modeling is typically associated with more organic style of modeling, although that may not always be the case. Spline modeling or shape modeling or extrusion modeling, depending on what it's called, it works better for man-made objects or objects of intelligent design, things that are going to be on the grid in straight lines and snapped into place. Box modeling, you just subdivide and you extrude and you get things to where they look the way you want, and you could almost think of it also like painting. It's like 3D painting. It's like going and painting your scene. But its better analogy is like working with clay. And I guess I don't know what a better analogy for spline modeling would be, but I don't have a lot of experience with box modeling, so we'll be learning that as we go along, because I need to learn that. And probably in later videos I'd like to go into subdivision, but no promises. There are a couple of different universe types that I know of. The old Unreal series of games, up to Unreal Tournament 2004, were what were called a subtractive universe. And a subtractive universe is as if you were working on in a block of wood. You were inside a block of wood and you were carving your level out of that space. It was kind of revolutionary for the time. Then with Unreal Tournament 3 and up through the newest versions of the Unreal Development Kit, and I think also the Unity 3D GCS or Game Creation Engine and CryEngine, and of course Blender here, and also 3ds Max and probably Maya and most other modeling applications, they've all gone to what is called an additive universe. And an additive universe is a big empty space, which you can see portrayed by this just big gray void. We can actually change that to black and different other colors too. We can put stars back there if we want to make it even more void-like. But it's like we're out in outer space and there's nothing there, and we're putting stuff, we're building our age out of nothingness. We're putting it into a void, into a vacuum. So that is what we'll be doing here in Blender. We'll be adding things to the modeling program, and we'll be creating our age from the stuff that we add to it. There are also two kinds of coordinate systems, and I don't know which one Blender is. There's left-hand and right-hand coordinate systems, and it has something to do with your thumb the direction it points. So your left hand, your thumb points to your right, and your right hand, your thumb points to your left. You can see here that we have z-axis is up, we have x-axis is going to the side, and we have y-axis is going back and forth. Correlates here. This is a 3D transform manipulator, is that what they call it? Manipulator. Because we can actually manipulate and move this object around using any of these arrows. And this is just a readout so we can see what's going on. And this is the world axis. And the different axes are changed over here where it says global. You click in here and you've got different axes you can use. So those are just some terminologies and things that you should be familiar with. So we're going to be designing this thing here. Something I wanted to point out about this design, I believe I have mentioned. If I have not, I'm mentioning it. I've done so many recasts now, I don't even know where I am anymore. But the player height is going to be something like 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 4 mouse cursor heights next to this obelisk. And so the point of this obelisk, if you ever played a Halo 2 map, you've noticed that in the center of the level, and that's Halo 2, I'm sorry I yawned there, but you notice in the center of the level or off to the sides there would be some large object that would grab your attention. In the Myst universe, if you look across the lake, once you get in the cave, you see that there's a structure across the lake. It's something that draws the player's interest. It's something that gets their attention and makes them wonder why it's there. Without this obelisk here in the middle of the space, it would be very boring and static and stale. This obelisk gives players something to stand up next to and look at and wonder at. And especially if we're able to make a really good texture and put like writing on it or something, that would make it really cool. We could even make it part of a puzzle, depending on how far I took the series. So I've coined the term point of visual interest, but I don't know if I'm the originator or the copyright holder of that term, but that's what this is serving here. The player is roughly 2 by 2 by 6. So if I was to pressing and holding shift, pressing and holding middle mouse button and dragging, if I was to shift D, which would duplicate, that's press and hold shift, press and hold D, release D, release shift. Actually it's press and release D. But and then G and then Z. We're already in grab mode once you duplicate, but just being redundant. So press and hold shift, press and release D, release shift, G and Z, which means we're only moving it along the Z axis. And I've done 2 there. That's about the size the player will be. The player would fit snugly inside this box. That's 2 by 2 by 6 Blender units. We can verify that by pressing numpad 1, and you can see 2, 4, 6, 2, and of course it's 2 over on the other side as well. There is an avatar you can use to design around, but I won't be bringing that in or using it. A couple of design principles we need to keep in mind when we're putting things together. We want to use the remove doubles option that's how we weld or merge vertices in Blender. And we want to make sure there's no walls. Like for example, I wouldn't want to have this bottom face here because the player won't be going underneath and looking up at this. So this we wouldn't want to render. And there's faces now in between each of these cubes that would also need to be deleted, because if this was one object, the player wouldn't see those internal faces, so we'd want to remove those. We remove all faces the player will not see that are not necessary. In the case of a wall, we'd want the outside face, even though the player would never see necessarily the wall from the outside. We'd want that there, and we'd want the top, but we wouldn't want the bottom. We wouldn't want inside type walls and faces. And that'll be more important when we get into our actual modeling and cleaning things up. I'll be going into that more in depth. But that is just good basic design principle. We want to develop those good habits now. So we're going to go ahead and rough out our floor and wrap this video up. So I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short. So I'm pressing X to erase, left clicking on the object, pressing X, and that's press and release. And remember, the menu pops up where my cursor is. And now I've cleared everything out. And I'm going to start phasing out the press and release and press and hold part of everything. I'm going to do it occasionally, every once in a while, but I just want you to get very familiar with the controls. But by now, that should be starting to become very familiar and almost getting redundant. I want to reduce that redundancy. So, pressing and releasing spacebar, going to add mesh plane. This is a 2x2 plane. I'm going to press in. And that's our transform panel. And these are our sizes, dimension X, Y, and Z. So our transform properties is what they call it. And I have done this a couple of times, and I'm thinking that 20 is the size I want to start with. There's no Z amount because this is a plane. There's no depth. If I was to rotate around, you can kind of get that idea. It's like a piece of paper. So I am Xing out of here. You could also press in to do the same thing. Okay, so this will be our center area. And we want to have stairs going up about maybe 5 units. And we want the stairs to be 1 unit tall and 2 units deep. I do not know how high the player character and you can walk, so this will be an experiment. Pressing and releasing G, pressing and holding control, dragging this down 5 units. So now we're already here, pressing 7. Alright. Remember Shift S, if I haven't already said that, is you can snap your selection to the grid, your cursor to the grid, or your selection to your cursor. There's a bunch of different options. So I'm making sure that it's all the grid, but I'm pretty sure it was. Now I'm going to go up here and I am going to right click and set the 3D cursor there, press Shift S, and now go cursor to grid. And now my cursor is right on the grid. I'm going to press spacebar, add mesh plane. And now we need to increase the size, so I'm pressing in and I am going by, and you can also press S and it'll immediately be in scale mode, and you can move your mouse to scale it up and down. You can use control to scale it on the grid and shift control to scale it finally, but I'm just doing it this way. So we want 20 in our width, we want 10 in our depth, and of course there's no, by depth, I don't mean depth from a Z sense, you know. It's going to be half of the size of this. This is where the stairs will exit out to. So I'll press Shift C. Well, I can't stop yawning. And that centered my cursor to the grid. And remember, C, if I press it after that, will now center my view to the cursor. Now I'm going to go over here where this bullseye looking thing is and click on that. That's the pivot. And I want to pivot around the 3D cursor. This is still highlighted. You can see that over here. I'll expand these. And I'm going to press Shift D. And now it's been duplicated. And it's immediately in grab mode. If I was to move the mouse cursor, the object would move. So I'm going to press R and press and hold control, and now I can move it in the direction that I want. I'm going to press Shift and click on here. Now you may not be able to tell this very easily, but this is a darker color and this is a lighter color. This is the last object I clicked on. I think it's called the last selected object or some technical term like that, but keep that in mind. The last object you click on in a selection is going to be lighter than the other objects. Pressing Shift D, pressing R, pressing and holding control. Okay. And I'm going to put that back to what it was originally. So back to median point. and I'm pressing and holding the middle mouse button, and I'm taking a look at what I have here. Okay. Now I screwed up slightly. You probably didn't notice, or you might have noticed. This is not the level that we initially had had done. I haven't changed the lamp and all of that stuff. I'm going to do that now. After I exit out of here, I think we're all done for this video, and I will see you in the next video.